Hi, everyone. Welcome to Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. We are going to talk today what it looks like to evolve from an expert to a thought leader. And I'm so excited for our guest today. I'm Carol Cox, founder and CEO of Speaking Your Brand. With me is Diane Diaz, our lead speaking coach at Speaking Your Brand.
Hi, everybody.
And with us are two of the women who have graduated from our Thought Leader Academy. We have Emily Rogers and Jackie Roby. Emily Rogers lives in the Central Florida area, just about an hour or so from where Diane and I live in the Orlando area. And Emily is a business consultant, an executive coach, and a retreat facilitator. She was recently on the Speaking Your Brand podcast, actually just last week. So you can hear more about her there. And then Jackie Roby works in the travel industry as a sales consultant and also encouraging them to do more DEI initiatives, and also works around this idea of healing and wellness in the travel industry. So I'm so excited to talk to them today about thought leadership, what thought leadership means to them, and how they are creating content around their thought leadership. If you're watching live, definitely pop questions into the comments. We can see your comments, so we will take your questions as we go along the way. And if you're watching the replay, say hi to us, because we will also go back and check the comments. So let me start off with this first. Jackie, what does it mean to you to be a thought leader?
As a thought leader, it means creating curiosity, challenging the status quo, getting people to reflect and look within and then look without and potentially move forward and make a change.
I love this idea of creating curiosity. Yes, that's beautiful, Jackie. Emily, what about you? What do you see as what thought leadership means?
Yeah, thanks, Carol. Great to be with you all today. And I echo Jackie's sentiments. And I'll add that thought leaders are visionary in their thinking. They are pointing to a brighter future, inviting people to come along on the journey, and showing the way through their expertise and their experience and their advice and counsel and coaching.
Oh, those are great. That's a great definition as well. Thank you, Emily. And I see Heather Zeitz-Wolf is watching us live. Heather was in our Thought Leader Academy with Jackie, and they both graduated back in March. And then Emily recently graduated in August, just a couple of weeks ago. Heather, so nice for you to be here. And if you are watching us live or in the replay, say hi to us as well. So Jackie, actually, that's a good segue into this. What was the enticement for you to join the Thought Leader Academy? What was it about this idea of presenting yourself as a thought leader and the work that you can do under thought leadership that drew you to going through the program with us?
Okay, well, first and foremost, I'm a Speaking Your Brand super fan. So that was the beginning for me. But then also it was really crafting and curating my message. And I knew that when I started my business, it was going to be much different than anything that had been offered in the travel industry previously. I learned very quickly in that I was a disruptor in a very positive way. And I loved what the Thought Leadership Academy was offering to streamline that and really give me the push, the confidence, and the clarity to move that forward.
Okay, and we'll dig in just a few moments about what that thought leadership looks like for you and what you've been doing this year. Emily, what about you? What drew you to this idea of thought leadership and then joining our Thought Leader Academy?
So when I started my business in 2013, I made an industry shift. As you know, I had been a consultant and executive leader within the sponsorship industry, was looked to as an expert and a thought leader in that space. And so when I transitioned to owning my own business and focusing on executive coaching and leadership development, I needed to establish myself as an expert in that field, first and foremost. And I spent, a good 3 or 4 years doing that through my teaching and facilitation and training and coaching and telling stories about the work that I was doing with my clients. And then, 4 or 5 years into my business, I really began to see opportunities to once again position myself as a thought leader in the space of leadership, and started writing for the Lakeland Ledger, for Forbes, publishing guides. And so I was doing that and just saw a need to refine my messaging And that's what attracted me to the Thought Leader Academy, is because I had a lot of great content that I had generated through the years and was doing a lot with that. But I wanted to be so much more strategic about how I was using my content and how I was shaping my messaging and telling stories about the work that I do with my clients, and the ways in which I serve the community that I live and work in.
And that we're going to dive into what this content looks like for both of you. And I also want to say that, Emily, you met Diane at an in-person conference back when those were a thing. And so, and this is, I just want to remind everyone listening that in-person events and conferences are slowly coming back, and they'll be coming back soon, even more so. And then it is such a great opportunity to connect with other women who you otherwise, may never run into. And so I think that was an event that, Diane, you weren't speaking at it. You were just attending this. It was the Women's Conference of Florida, correct?
I think it was, that's what it was called. It was in Tampa, and it was Monica Lewinsky, I believe, was the keynote speaker. I think that was the right one, right, Emily?
That's right.
Yeah,
yes. And we were in a conference room with 1,000 other women, which was, hasn't happened in a long time.
Yes. And we were seated at tables of maybe 10 or 12. They were huge tables. And, I think, and like you said, 1,000 women in the room. And I just sort of introduced myself to several of the women at the table, and Emily was one of them. And then we chatted for a little bit and then connected on LinkedIn afterwards. And then here she is.
Yes. So the power of in-person and the power of LinkedIn as well for making connections. Jackie, let's talk about content and the content that you've been creating really for almost the past year around your thought leadership message. Can you tell us what the purpose of that content is and the channels that you're using to distribute it?
Sure. So the message itself is travel can heal. And initially I thought social media would be the key space for that. I wanted to let people know that travel was available to support their healing journey. I wanted those who needed that to come together and build a community, and also to highlight those in the travel industry that are providing those services. And yes, that has absolutely been a big push and continues to be, which I'm grateful for. The podcast, however, was kind of an afterthought, and I knew I was going to do it, and I really pushed and started the podcast, which is called Through Inspired Eyes, Travel Can Heal. That really took off and got so much attention from the travel industry and from travelers as well. So I continue to actually put more and more effort into that space. When utilizing social media, I am vulnerable. Actually, I would say I'm vulnerable in both spaces. I'm very open about my own journey and what I've been through, but also encourage those to be vulnerable when they speak with me. And I can say that I've had so many people come to me on social media in my DMs and tell me their story and thank me for sharing so they didn't feel alone. And then I'm very grateful that people that have come on the podcast have been equally as open about things that they've been going through. So it's really normalizing that conversation too.
And Jackie, I think this is a great point about vulnerability. And I believe that to be a thought leader, you do have to be vulnerable with your own journey and what that has looked like for you, so that you can normalize it and validate for the other people who are watching and listening. And Jackie was one of our outstanding speakers at our Brave Bold Beyond Live Virtual Summit, the first one we did last October of 2020. And Jackie, you really opened the door with the vulnerability of your speech for so many of the other women who were watching that summit, but then who also ended up enrolling in the Thought Leader Academy with you. So I know I say thank you to you all the time for that, but really thank you. And I'm so glad that you're continuing that with the podcast and the other content that you're creating.
Thank you. I'm honored and grateful. And that was such a huge moment for me. And it really gave me power in a way that I didn't have prior.
And Emily, what about you? This idea of vulnerability and thought leadership, what does that look like for you? What has that looked like so far for you?
Yeah, that is a journey. That continues to be a journey for me, as you know. As professional coaches, and if there are any professional coaches that are tuning into this, I think they'll really appreciate this. We are instructed as part of our foundational professional coaching training to really self-manage, meaning that as we are coaching, it's all about the client and the client's agenda. Okay. And so, from that perspective, I sometimes hesitate to bring myself into the work that I do. And I see heads nodding. And so it looks like that's resonating. And yet, as a thought leader, when I position myself as a thought leader outside of a coaching session, through my writing, through a speaking engagement, there are lots of opportunities for me to interject my stories, my trials, my tribulations, the things that have worked for me and the things that haven't, and the burnout and workaholicism that I have overcome through the years. And when I do put myself out there and share those stories, it does really, really resonate, and it touches people's hearts. And so there is value in that. And Carol, as you know, I'm working on getting better at doing more of that in appropriate places and in appropriate settings.
Absolutely, Emily. And I feel you on that. It is definitely a journey for me as well. And I agree with you about a coaching session is very different than putting your thought leadership message out on your writing, on a podcast, on a LinkedIn Live, whatever it happens to be. And I just want to say hi to Nicole. Hi, Melanie. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions for us as we go along, please feel free to pop in. We're talking right now about thought leadership content that Emily and Jackie have been creating, what thought leadership means to them. So Emily, let me ask you about the thought leadership content that you've been creating, and what are you also looking to do going forward?
Yeah. So I mentioned my writing, and that's something I started doing 4 or 5 years ago. Started writing a monthly column for the Lakeland Ledger business section, and I continue to do that. I love doing that. In fact, I'll be submitting my next article to them tomorrow. And I also am part of the Forbes Coaches Council, which gives me an opportunity to publish through Forbes and serve as an expert, in terms of contributing to some articles as well. So I do both. I write and I contribute. And I've been doing that for a couple of years now. You'll see on my website, I publish a number of guides related to leadership excellence. And so that's just another way to access my content. And then, of course, Carol, as you know, through speaking engagements, and 2 speaking engagements that I have coming up in September, which is right around the corner, which is really focused on this latest topic that I wrote about in Forbes, titled Women Are Already Empowered, and that women are already empowered in so many ways. And it's our organizational systems that need to catch up so that everybody in the workplace, especially women, can thrive and have long-term sustainable career success. So I would say my message is being refined as I go constantly. And, through my experience with the Thought Leader Academy, I'm beginning to envision how I might refine even further and do some new and different things in 2022. Not quite sure what that's going to look like yet, but I'm open to all of the possibility that you inspired in me, Carol.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, I can't wait to hear more as the months develop. And I want to also point out that the great thing about thought leadership content is that it has a long shelf life, and it will impact people well beyond just, say, your first degree connections. And here's a great example of that. So Emily mentioned that she wrote this article for Forbes, and so that was published. She shared it on LinkedIn. I saw her share it on LinkedIn. So then I shared it to my LinkedIn network and, wrote a little comment about it. And then one of my connections, Casey Gromer, read it, mentioned Emily and the article on Casey, her podcast called Female Founders Breaking Boundaries. I heard it on the podcast, heard her mention Emily in the article. Casey does not know Emily. Casey does not know that I know Emily, other than just having seen it on LinkedIn. And so then I did an email introduction between Casey and Emily so that they too could connect. And that one thing came from Emily putting her thought leadership out into this writing.
Yes. It's powerful and it sticks.
And it's almost like related to the vulnerability. When you're vulnerable, it brings back so much more support. And the thought leadership, when you position yourself that way and you start putting out those messages, it brings back the support because of the fact that it sticks.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to dig a little bit more into vulnerability now, since this topic has come up. So I would love to hear from you about the mindset shift you have had to make from, say, seeing yourself, as an expert who has all the answers, who is just going to I'm going to stay in my lane. This is my experience, my credentials, my degrees. I'm an expert in this, and this is where my comfort zone is here, my expertise, which is fabulous. Like, we need experts to do the things that they do. Thought leadership, though, thought leaders have to go, beyond the margins a little bit, right? Go into that unknown territory to help the audience imagine something that's new and different. And also, I believe thought leaders, really good thought leaders, ask questions more than they have the answers to things. So with that in mind, Jackie, what kind of mindset shift did you have to make? And maybe perhaps you're still, I know I'm still working on mine, which you all will find out on tomorrow's podcast episode. What have you had to shift for yourself?
Well, I've spent my career in sales and in the travel and hospitality industry. And so when I started my own business, the thought process was always around everything sales and even selling for other people. And until I had that moment when I realized this isn't what I want, this isn't my future. So making a change to being a thought leader was really saying it's so much more. I offer more to the world than this past. And saying I might be an expert in these spaces, but I'm living in my brilliance over here. And it was embracing that. And I love to learn, and I never think I have all the answers. And so this for me was, I feel like, a natural fit, but the comfort zone of doing something I always have done, that was a big change. That was a really big change. And I would say it takes a lot of meditation, occasional anxiety attacks.
Vulnerability hangovers.
Yeah, definitely vulnerability hangovers. And gratitude.
Yeah.
That's nice. Emily, what about you?
Yeah.
What mindset shifts have you had to make?
Well, first, Jackie beautifully said. So when I think about making the shift from an expert to a thought leader, I think about it a few different ways. One, being an expert gets you pretty far along, right? And can help you generate clients. Yet it only helps you get so far when you are the face of your business and you are the one that is responsible for business development for your business, right? And so when we act as thought leaders and we are perceived as thought leaders, then we are attracting more of the kinds of clients that we want to attract to our business. And therefore, our businesses become more sustainable and more successful for the long term. And so that's a big mindset shift, I think, in terms of when you think about, well, why would I even want to put myself out there and be a thought leader? If you're the face of your business, it's almost necessary to your success and the sustainability. And another way I think about it, which is just really important to me these days, as I consider the impact that I want to have on my clients and the community that I operate in for the next 5 to 10 years, is my ability to be a thought leader is very tied to my legacy and what I want to be known for and what I want to be remembered for 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And so that is a really important component for me. And Carol, through my 4-month journey with the Thought Leader Academy, I was just recently telling a friend of mine who was considering becoming part of your next Thought Leader Academy that the work deepened my connection with my purpose, which is also very much tied to my legacy. And I think really helps me clarify my messaging, my thought leadership messaging, and what I really want to put out there in the world and the impact that I want to have and the change that I want to create in the people that I work with and influence.
Oh, well, that's beautiful, Emily. Point. Yes. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
I just have to say, I'm so sorry, Carol, to interrupt. Yep. Emily, that was so spot on. And I love the thought of what you're putting out there when it comes to your thought leadership is attracting the right clientele.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
That's spot on. And that's going to create a happier existence and a stronger, better business.
Yeah, absolutely. It does.
Yes, and we attract amazing women like you. So, right? So, which I'm so grateful for. And it reminds me that I was having a conversation with a new client a couple of weeks ago. And yes, we do occasionally work with men one-on-one. He was referred to me from a referral partner who I know very well, so I trust her. And he was fabulous, great to work with. And he said that, when he first got referred to me to Speaking Your Brand, he went to the Speaking Your Brand website, looked at all over. And when we were on the consult call, he said, I love your website and all the messaging because you have found a way to monetize your mission. Mm. I was like, he saw that through that. And that's what I love, this idea of monetizing your mission, because we are in business. We need to, this is our livelihood, whatever our business happens to be. But I know I get up every morning fueled by the mission of what I'm doing, and then knowing that the business is coming along for the ride with that.
Mm.
That's powerful, Carol.
So we have a question from Nicole Rochester. Hi, Nicole. She wants to know, how do you scale thought leadership? Well, that's a good question. Any ideas?
Really good question.
What comes to mind?
I often think of it as repurposing good content. That is a way that I scale. So I might blog about something, and then it becomes an article, and then it becomes a guide that's part of a training program. And so I'm always looking at ways to continually repurpose the content that I'm creating and deliver it in different ways, because people like to consume content in different ways. So that's one way I think of scaling, just to start the response there.
Mm. So, Nicole, I would say it's immediately bringing people into the mission.
Of that.
Spreading the word, educating. A couple of things that I had done were using a hashtag. And so that was a space to have people follow it, to have people use it. Consider it a community, which is what it became. I actually considered it a challenge at first, and now it's really an initiative, a movement. And then through speaking opportunities, that's something that it's consistently brought up and told to different audiences. So it's not just within my industry, it is outside. It's to all travelers, to anyone who's interested in hearing and learning. And that brings them into the fold and scales it.
That's
Jackie,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, Jackie, can you share your hashtag that you used? It was so good.
Oh, sure. It's hashtag travel can heal.
Yes. And this is asking a great point, Jackie. So in our Thought Leader Academy, the first month, the women work on their thought leadership message and then choosing a container or a project for their thought leadership. So it could be a podcast or a podcast series. It could be a LinkedIn Live show, a YouTube show. It could be a challenge with a hashtag. It could be an initiative. So that's really the way to scale your thought leadership message, is to get other people to talk about it with you. And that's this idea behind a project, is to make it participatory so that other people can get involved. And it's not just a one-way conversation. It really becomes a dialogue between you and your audience. So whether it's speaking, challenges, podcast guesting, a LinkedIn Live shows, an initiative, a project, are all ways that you can scale your thought leadership and reach a lot more people than just you delivering content to your clients. All right. So, okay. Yeah. Nicole, come back and watch the recording on that. And I just want to say hi, Jason. Hi, Mary Ellen. So nice to see you here. If you have any questions for us, let us know. We're going to keep going with some of the other questions that I have here for Emily and for Jackie. So let's talk a little bit about why you decided to join the Thought Leader Academy. We talked a little bit about what this idea of thought leadership means. Was there something in particular about the program, any aspect of the program that drew you to doing this versus say just doing it on your own, just continuing to, to do whatever you were doing before you came into the academy? Emily, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So it was a timing thing for me when I decided to start the Thought Leader Academy. And that's because I had a couple speaking engagements coming up in September that I mentioned earlier. And I've been speaking and training and facilitating and coaching from behind a computer screen for 18 months now, like everybody else. And I was really feeling a little anxious and rusty, at the thought of, getting back out there in front of a live audience again soon. So that was one reason that really compelled me to do this, because I wanted to, come out in September really strong as people began to feel comfortable getting back out and attending live events once again. And I really wanted to deliver a lot of value to the audiences that I'm going to be in front of in September. So that was my time sensitive why I joined, and yet got even so much more out of it than I ever imagined.
Oh, great, Emily. What about you, Jackie?
Well, there are two things that I consistently trust: the universe and the experts. And when I put my 5-year plan together when building this business, later on, closer to the 5-year mark, was going to be speaking. And the Brave Bold Beyond Summit came to me much sooner, within less than a year of being in business. So I followed that. And the Thought Leadership Academy came right after that. So I followed that. And again, I trust the experts, and I am a fan. I listened to the podcast. I was coached during the summit. I knew that this was going to propel me to the next level of the vision that I had for my future.
Well, I'm so glad that the stars aligned just for that and kind of accelerated your 5-year plan for you. And I'm so glad, Jackie, that it did. Again, if you all have any questions, let us know here in the comments. We're going to be wrapping up in the next couple of minutes. Diane, let me ask you what, going through these 2 groups in the Thought Leader Academy now that we've had, and we're getting ready to enroll our 3rd group coming up in the fall. What have you seen from the women who've gone through our program?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because it actually ties to the comment I wanted to make, kind of in relation to what Jackie said. It's perfect connection. I think as I look at all the women that have gone through these cohorts of the Thought Leader Academy, I think for many of them, they were ready to become thought leaders before they realized they were ready to become thought leaders, right? And so I think oftentimes we don't realize that we're ready, but other people or opportunities are telling us we are ready. And so I love that Jackie took that opportunity to speak at the Brave Bold Beyond Summit, maybe before you were ready. I don't know if you felt you were ready, but you were definitely ready. But before you, it was like the natural thing that you had wanted to do, because those opportunities present themselves for a reason, right? And I see that among many women, and a lot of women come into the Thought Leader Academy thinking, I'm not even really sure what my thought leadership message is, but they always arrive at something really strong and impactful. And I think that brings out their vulnerability, creates a community, creates a movement. It's so just inspiring to see for me as a coach. And the other thing is the community they build among each other is also just beautiful to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Jackie, I know that your cohort finished in March. I know many of you are still in contact with each other. I see you on each other's podcast, which I love to see that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love my group. Yeah, no, we are consistently in contact. I love the women that are attracted, that you bring in, because they are beautiful souls and really truly care about each other.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I know we have an alumni call coming up next week after
We're
Labor
so
Day. So I'm very excited to have the groups come together and to chat with each other. And then I'm thinking about, Diane, you mentioned about, the women that you've seen gone through the Thought Leader Academy, and how a lot of times they'll come in, like obviously they're attracted to this idea of thought leadership, but they're not sure exactly what that looks like for them. And I love our graduation speeches that they did give at the last call, because they always say something to the effect of, I am a thought leader, like believing in themselves that they can do it. And I believe any woman who's listening right now can absolutely do it. Just a matter of like, having this mindset shift, believing that you can put something out there that maybe even feels a little messy in the beginning or feels a little uncertain, but you keep iterating, you keep putting it out there, and you see what happens. And I believe that you are learning so much about yourself as you go through this journey of thought leadership, as much as the audience is learning from you with the content that you're putting out.
Yes. Carol, I'm so glad you mentioned the messy part, because you made it okay and safe for all of us to be messy with it to start. And that's just a natural part of the process. And we learn and grow from, within ourselves and from each other in that messiness. So I'm glad you mentioned that. That was really well done in the way that you created the safe space for all of that to happen, or for us to feel comfortable not having all the answers and feeling a little clumsy with it all to start.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that, Emily. Yes, we are definitely none of us are perfect. I definitely am not perfect. So I appreciate having those spaces to be messy. So I'm more than happy to offer it to other women. All right. So let us go ahead and wrap up. We're going to let watchers and listeners know where they can connect with you. Make sure to connect with Emily and Jackie on LinkedIn while you're here on LinkedIn. Go and connect with them on their profiles. And Emily, let us know what your website address is, and if there's any other place besides LinkedIn where people can connect with you.
Sure. Best place is on my website, emilyrogers.com, and LinkedIn are the best place to find me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Jackie?
I would say search for my podcast through Inspired Eyes. And then I'm most often on Instagram. My Instagram handle is the same as my website. It's Inspired Journey Consulting.
.com. Great. Fantastic, Jackie. Emily, thank you so much for coming on our LinkedIn live show. It has been a pleasure to work with you in our Thought Leader Academy. And for those of you who are listening and watching, you can get all of the information about our Thought Leader Academy, and you can sign up for our interest list right now. Enrollment will be opening next week in September after Labor Day. But go ahead and get on our interest list so you're the first to know when enrollment opens. That's at speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Again, speakingyourbrand.com/academy. And what we do is that we will set up a consultation call with you so we can talk about your goals, your business, what your thought leadership will look like, or what you want it to look like. And then we'll decide if the Thought Leader Academy is the best fit for you, because it's a weekly program. Like, Jackie and Emily can say, like, obviously you spend as much time as you can on it, but we take you through the curriculum. You have homework assignments to do. Yes. We work with you on one-on-one coaching calls, because we want to make sure that you are getting as much out of the program as we put into it. So we'll set up a call with you to talk about all of that and to learn more about you. So again, that's at speakingyourbrand.com/academy. And our next LinkedIn live show will be in 2 weeks from today. We do it every other Monday. Same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Eastern. So make sure to keep a lookout for that post as they come about. And until then, thanks for watching.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.